morning. No, actually, good afternoon, because I know we're in the same time zone. Lucas, welcome. Welcome to the Culture Matters podcast. How are you?
Very good. Thank you, Chris. Again, very happy to be here with you today.
Okay, that's good. All right. So I start this question always, which gives me enough time to go and make some coffee. Here's the question: tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you come from, or where do you think you come from? Where are you now at this moment while we're doing the recording? And what would you consider your so-called cultural frame of reference? And a cultural frame of reference is usually not your 2 weeks in Cancun on holiday. That doesn't give you a lot of cultural reference. It can, but it not necessarily. So go ahead.
So that's an interesting question. I think by now it's very difficult for me to say exactly where I'm from. I was born and raised in Geneva, in Switzerland. I'm a son of Spanish immigrants in Geneva. So my first language are both Spanish and French. I still consider French being my first language, though. I grew up in Geneva, in Switzerland. Traveled a lot because I did quite a few, like I played a lot of sports. Traveled a lot, mainly in Europe. And when I graduated, I wanted to live the so-called European dream. So I moved to the UK. I spent actually like close to 5 years in the UK, between London and Liverpool. I was an ERP consultant, so I was traveling a lot. They used to send me like 3 months, between 3 to 6 months per country. So I spent quite a bit of time in Taiwan, Australia, New Zealand, the US, Ireland as well. Then I moved to the UAE. I spent close to 2 years between London and Dubai, mostly in Dubai, traveling in the GCC area. And this is when we created talent.com, at the time called Nouveau, and this is when I moved to Montreal, and spent 10 years in Montreal. So basically, I became an adult, had kids, got married, everything in Canada. So I'm a Canadian citizen as well now. So I'm Swiss, Spanish, Canadian, and traveled extensively throughout North America. Married a Colombian lady, so traveled a lot in Colombia and Latin America in general. And for the last past year now, I moved to Barcelona, where we have a new office. And so here I am now in the CET time zone in Barcelona.
Okay, for those of you who don't know what CET is, Central European Time Zone, which is Western Europe, including up until Poland, right? Belarus will shift 1 hour. Anyway, so you either started when you were 12, or you're in your 60s now. How do you if you add that all up? Come on, this is not possible for a human being.
No, the thing is, I think, well, you know what? I left Switzerland when I was 23, and so during those 5 years in the UK, I was officially based in the UK, but this is when I traveled a lot as well. Yeah. This is when I went to Asia and as well as the UAE, and so I think like really in the UK there were like 3 full years. And the rest were basically traveling all around. And so when I was 27, that's when 28, I moved to Canada, and then 10 years in Canada, and now I'm close to be 39. So a year here in Barcelona.
All right. Entonces podemos continuar en español si quieres.
Podríamos continuar en español también, o en francés, o como quieras.
Pero no vamos a hacerlo. Because the majority of the audience is mostly English speaking. It's about 50% in the US and 50% the rest of the world. But we're not really to talk about your childhood and your travels. That's not what this is about. This is the Culture Matters podcast on international business. So let's talk about business. And I know you started the company talent.com, if I'm not mistaken, but judging by the names in the discrepancy by two French-speaking Swiss friends. Yeah, is that correct?
So as we created the company with like two Swiss French, and one Quebecer, and who spent quite a bit of his life as well in Switzerland. So the common city here is Geneva in Switzerland, so a very international city.
Yeah.
And Ben, who the Quebecer from Canada, had the original idea and already had moved to Montreal at the time. And this is when Max and I basically decided to follow him on this crazy adventure. And this is when we moved to Montreal.
I can imagine. I mean, you could. I guess you could be able to become a millionaire by simply selling your domain name, talent.com.
Yeah, I think this is something that, like we used to be called Nuvo, and Nuvo means advisor in Suomi, so in Finnish. And because when you start and you have no resources and the money and like you're getting into the job space, good luck finding a great domain name. And so what happened is that as we grew and as we knew that we wanted to become a brand, and if you want to work with SMBs, you need to be a brand.
And for those of you for those of the audience who are not familiar,
so it's like small and medium-sized businesses. When they post jobs, they need to know who you are, and so this is why one of the reasons why we wanted to basically change our name. And since the company grew, we were lucky enough that talent.com was for sale, and we were able to snitch it.
Good for you. So talent.com, just explain to us in a few sentences what you do. It might sound obvious, but nonetheless. And then I've got a few follow-up questions about this.
So we are a job search website. Today, what we do, we index content. So we scrape jobs from every single career website in the planet in 79 countries and in 22 languages. So our promise to candidates is to find every single job available on the web from large companies on our platform, a bit like Google, but for jobs. And so we monetize through pay-per-click advertising. So the companies are displayed for free and have the opportunity to sponsor their job listings and have the candidates redirected directly to their career sites.
And as soon as somebody clicks on I want to become a waiter in this restaurant, whatever, then that click costs that company money, which you pocket, at least partly.
Exactly.
Now, I knew what you did because I saw that I read that in your introduction, but evidently the audience didn't or doesn't. Now they do. What made you start this company? And I was thinking, you're not the only one in this space. There are more organizations that do something similar or comparable. Isn't this a saturated business that you're in?
Yeah, so I think the idea when we started, and Ben had the original idea here, my co-founder, was, like traditional job boards at the time, you had to post a job, right? Like as a company, when you needed to find someone, a candidate or an employee, you would post and pay for a job to be displayed on their site. And so as a candidate, you would only see jobs that companies would be ready to pay for, on those traditional job sites. And so we wanted to make sure that by scraping every single job around, candidates will have the opportunity to see everything. So instead of seeing just a few jobs in a particular economy, you would see everything. And the particular thing about our space is that it's not a one player takes it all. And so, candidates go on average on 14 different sites when they look for jobs, just because they have different search results, and the job search process is very, very aspirational, and people imagine themselves in different positions, jobs, geographies, industries, and as long as you provide relevant results as a job site, you could have an audience. And so it's a bit like a TV. And so you just not necessarily have one TV, right? You have different TVs that you look at and different channels that you look at. And this is what we are, one of a main generalist large channel that exists today in the industry.
Okay. And so because a follow-up question could have been or would have been, what makes you different? And that's the thing that you're the collective or the collector, if you want, from the monster boards, the Stepstone. These are the tools that came to mind when I was looking for jobs, but that was 100 years ago. So in terms of culture as such, in which countries are you most active?
So we are, as in terms of revenues, the larger countries are the usual suspects. So the US, Canada, the UK, France, Germany, Benelux, Switzerland. Like that would be the usual suspects that you would think of. In terms of our people, we are based in Montreal. That's our headquarters are in Montreal. We have a U.S. headquartered in Chicago. We have as well as an engineering HQ in Colombia, in Medellin. And then we have a European headquarter in Lausanne, in Switzerland, as well as offices in London, in Paris, in Amsterdam, and Barcelona.
Okay.
Yep.
And offices are physical buildings, bricks and.
Yeah, what I mentioned here are physical offices, yes.
Okay, that's cool. But you mentioned the US, Canada, the UK, Benelux, Germany, and are these people, okay, the US is a big country, but take Benelux, for instance, Benelux and Germany and France, you said also. Are then people in France looking for jobs in France, or are there Germans that want to move to France and trying to find a job in their profession?
Yeah, so it really depends on the countries. Obviously, you as I mentioned before, I think the job search is extremely aspirational, and some people are looking to move countries, and so you would have some countries that attract a lot of foreign workers.
Example?
And so the US is one, Canada is another, the UK, the Netherlands, Switzerland. Switzerland is very strong, as well as Germany. These are the countries I would say that attract the most foreign workers on our platform.
Okay, and so that is an interchange of cultures then.
And so yes, so you have as a candidate, you have the opportunity to look for jobs in every single area, in every single country, basically. Yeah. So we do not, put a firewall and do not let you look for jobs in those countries. The idea here is that people can actually look for jobs everywhere.
Anywhere, okay. And you're the if you want, maybe I'm using an incorrect word. You're the intermediate between the job seeker and the company who's looking for people, and that's where it stops. You don't provide any other, I don't know, visa services or cultural onboarding or stuff like that. The extra bits and pieces for the client, for both sides actually, for the
you're right. Yeah.
The client to be successful with each other.
Yeah. So today we stop really at we are a marketplace basically, and we really help candidates find those jobs. But once the candidate leaves our website, we lose control, and we don't know if that person is being hired or not. And we count on our clients to let us know when they find people through our platform.
Okay, that's interesting. Are there in your how long have you been doing this now?
11 years for now. Yeah.
Telecom exists 11 years now.
Yeah, so it was Nouveau, but for the last 3 years now, it's been called Talent.com. Nearly 3 years.
Okay. How did you survive this whole Corona pandemic?
Well, the great thing about our industry is that we work well through economic cycles, because when employers when employers don't need to hire because the economy is not doing well, example during COVID, candidates come more often on the platform, and maybe employers spend less and invest less into hiring, so our average cost per clicks, which is our model, are lower, but candidates come more because they are looking for jobs, and so that allows us to actually get more clicks.
You make it up by volume in this case.
Exactly. And when it's the other way around, when candidates are not looking for jobs and employers are desperately looking for people, which is kind of what's happening in the US right now, well, the cost per clicks are higher, employers are ready to invest more, and so that allows us to monetize more despite having less candidates. So that's why we're able to actually navigate those cycles.
Okay, that's interesting. And thank you for sharing and being so open and how that works internally. So that's, I think the audience will appreciate that. Are there cultures that you find easier to find, to place, and or to work with? It's actually 3 questions in one. Well, you've answered one of them because you don't really find clients, they find you, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So what's your experience in terms of placement? Is it easier to put a German in the Benelux or to put a Canadian in France, or that crisscross virtualization?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I think I will speak more of my personal experience and as well as the company experience by hiring a lot of people from all around the world. I think we have more than 25 nationalities now working at talent.com, and so I think you have different countries that work in a different way. Like if you work in a country like Spain, for example, Spain has a very strong culture, and you would be completely embedded in the culture, and people will love that about Spain. That's what they come here as well, is that because they really love that culture. The same happens in Brazil, for example. Then in the more Anglo-Saxon world, I would say, and I'm talking about what I know most here is mainly here the US or Canada. Those countries are a bit more open in a sense that everyone is allowed to kind of live in their own life, their own way. That's more like how people see things, and people live more in communities. And so you can come from pretty much anywhere around the world and find what you're looking for in those countries, because you have people that are like, that look like you, or that feel like you, or that have the same, interest than you are, because it's more community based. And so I would say it really depends on the countries. I don't think there is one that is necessarily easier than other. I just find it's different. Some countries integrate a lot, and some countries, like are super open and is like, hey, come and live the way you always lived.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's interesting. I do a bit of research. I don't prepare a lot for these podcasts, and that's not necessarily because I'm lazy. I just prefer to go with the flow and see what comes out. But I did have a look at your LinkedIn profile, and I found a very interesting thing here. You did at the University of Liverpool. You did a master's in business football. What went wrong, or no? What changed?
No, when I used to when I was a child, I'd say I started very very early to play table tennis, and so I traveled all around Europe and played competitions. There was a lot of fun at the time. I played like 20 hours, trained 20 hours a week, and so I had the sports bug from very early. I've always loved every single sport around, and I always wanted to work in sports. I had a business degree, but I always found it hard to work in the business world of sports. And so I decided hey, I wanted to do a master's degree, and I wanted to work in sports, and I thought that I loved football, and I thought that maybe a master's degree in football management would actually allow me to be able to actually work in the sports industry. And what happened is that when I graduated, the wages that I would get in London were actually lower than I was getting before as an ERP consultant, and I was living by myself in London, so it was a bit hard to justify getting into the industry just for love. I think that most of the money goes to players in those kind of industries, and specifically football. Or if otherwise you need to work in government bodies like sports federations and things like that, or in sports brands as well. But that was a bit it was not that easy to get into this as well. And so I just decided to move past it and actually work in in an industry that would give me a decent wage so that I could afford to live in London.
Okay. That's cool. All right. That's so okay. So thank you for sharing that with us. It's interesting if you look at the past, how where you end up, which can be so totally different.
Yes.
I mean,
100%.
I ended up in doing a business which is relatively close to my education. But it's interesting to see somebody who did a master's in football industry. I'm reading it from my screen here, and ending up with a company called Talent.com. What's the future for Talent.com? What are the aspirations still at this moment?
Yeah, so I think for us, it's there are several players in the industry, as I mentioned,
Yeah.
and we want to be one. We want to be in the midterm. We want to become Pepsi's to Coke. And so there is a very large player called Indeed.com, which is number one right now in the world, and we wanna compete, and we wanna be number two. That's the objective in the midterm. Right now, we work extremely well with in Europe, mainly in EMEA, North America, and South America. And our goal is to expand in APAC, and to really become a global player in terms of traffic, candidate traffic that comes on our platform and that find a job. Today we have around 500,000 people that find a job every single month throughout the planet on our platform, and then the goal is to double this number, as fast as we can. Not only that, but it's also to focus on our SMBs. Historically, we didn't have much resources to actually really go beyond what we're doing, and the latest round of financing really allowed us to start thinking more and invest more into our SMB clients as well, and this is where we headed.
Okay, that's pretty ambitious, but if you have no ambition, then you're not going to go anywhere really.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. That's good to hear. Okay, I'd like to move on towards the last couple of questions that I have for you. Then one that I prepped you for before we started this this interview. So it's for the audience, from your own experience, or maybe your own and also your professional experience, being what you're doing with Talent.com. Can you give us 3 tips to become more culturally competent?
Well, I think the first one is in speaking languages. Actually, I think it helps a lot. The idea of when you speak a language, it's not only about the language, it's a culture. And the more languages you speak, the more lives you live, because you actually can understand and appreciate a culture. It's good things and it's bad things, and you can actually get along with people or not, and you will. It's gonna always be easier for you to integrate if you speak a language. And so I think this is the first one. And when you think about culture, I think communication is key. So that would be the first one. The second one, the second one is travel. I think the second one is travel. I think one of the reasons why Europeans are so strong and love culture is because we've been traveling in every single country all around Europe for a long time, and that's one we appreciate when we do business in Europe. And I think we the things that we do extremely right when doing business in Europe, because we understand that every single country works in a different way, because we've been there, we spend time there, we have friends from all those places. So I think that traveling all around the world really helps to understand the cultures. I spent like close to 3 months in Russia, and like just being 3 months in Russia allows me to think in a different way about like how the Russians work, how their culture works, how to approach business with them as well, And I think this is, I'm not saying that living there for like, obviously living there and speaking the language obviously help, but like just appreciate the culture and traveling. I think by traveling is extremely important. And then I think that my last point here is going to be more on the business perspective as well. Here is like, when you think about culture today and in business, like I come from like very federalistic countries, like Switzerland and now Canada as well, which is my adoptive country, which are two very federalist, type of societies. And this is how I see, and actually we see, and we talk about a lot about it with my co-founders. And this is how we see culture in a business. Like we think that culture should not be federal, but it should be provincial. It should always be at a lower level. You should not try to push too much on, like on like one country should not try to force a culture on everyone. And I think this is something that we've been extremely careful about. And I think that people appreciate at Talent.com is that, the US has its own culture. The Swiss have their own culture.
Yeah.
The French as well. And I think this is something that we really try to cultivate, is that culture has to be local. And if you understand that, I think your people will always ultimately appreciate it.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe we should do some cultural awareness workshops for your crew, your tribe there. So we'll think about it. Anyways, the last question is not about doing workshops together. The last question is, how can people get in touch with you if they want to?
Yeah, so I'm like I'm on LinkedIn. Try to answer everyone that drops me a line or tries to connect. Always happy to meet new interesting people in our industry and others. So please do not hesitate.
LinkedIn, you prefer LinkedIn? That's your.
Yes, yeah. LinkedIn is always the best one because my inbox receives like so much stuff that it goes straight to the spam nowadays without even me noticing.
That's good. All right. Well, thank you so much, Lucas Martinez from Talent.com. I'm pretty sure we'll bump into each other in the future. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Chris. Really appreciate the time you spent with me today.
Bye.